All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Gordon from Flash Fire. For those of you I don't know, with me tonight is Bernie Meehan, Matt Palmer, and Chris Zach. And we're going to go through attached garage fires tonight. So, like I said, I really appreciate you guys, tuning in. I appreciate Chris, Matt, and Bernie for donating their time to us this evening. Hopefully, it's a good discussion. Hopefully, everyone gets something out of it. We're not looking to solve the world's problems tonight or anything like that, but hopefully give some talking points, some, thought-provoking things that, might help someone else down the line. So what we have for, other than obviously listening to them talk tonight, we have the chat window as well, which I'm going to pull up in a minute. And you guys can ask questions to me there. That'll probably work best for tonight. In order to be able to, not have too much crosstalk or anything like that, just be able to send a quick chat. So I'll send that out in a second, just so you guys can see where it is and whatnot. But if you do have a question, you need to ask it. Feel free to just probably raise your hand is the best thing to do. There's actually an icon to do it there, so you don't have to physically raise your hand, but that's worked pretty well. And, hopefully, like I said, hopefully you'll enjoy the evening. So, quick layout of how it's going to go, at least in my mind. We'll do an introduction of the panel. We'll do some general thoughts on garage fires. So, obviously with dispatches, sometimes we have, more or less information. So if all you get is, a reported garage fire, what are kind of some of the automatic thoughts that are going through your head, some of the size up points, some of the considerations that you want before you even roll out the door, before you even get more information, before you even get on scene. Then we'll talk about some of the different garage types and how that might, or more garage locations and how that might affect our, thought process and first do tactics. And that's the main focus tonight, is the first do tactics. Where's that first line going? Where's our search going? Things like that. Then I have it quoted internet fires, but Matt Palmer has been sending me a few pictures the last few days. So I think that they're good because we have simulations, but obviously if we have a couple pictures from real fires, I think that will bring up some good discussion. And then I did throw together half a dozen or so simulations with the software that we use for, again, some more discussion points on that. And then at the end, there's a couple questions that people asked when they signed up, so we'll address those. And then finally, if you guys have any questions from the quote unquote audience, then we will go through that as well. So if there's no questions about that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the three different panelists, and I'm going to let them kind of introduce themselves. So we'll start with Bernie. So Bernie, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit? I sent you guys some of the stuff that I thought, would be good for the introduction. I'm just pulling it up here. But mostly just about you, career synopsis, what department you work for, and just some stuff about your department, so that when we get into a lot of the discussion points, it'll be a little more clear of what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So go ahead, Bernie.
I guess it's age before beauty. So yeah, there's a comical picture. It was about a week ago. I brought my Euro helmet to work one night just to annoy people. I do have a New Yorker. I still believe in New Yorkers. But I've been in Danbury for 35 years. I'm currently deputy chief, which places us as the operations guy around the clock. There's one deputy on duty. I think Milford is very similar to us, so I'm excited to hear what Chris has to say. The on-duty crew has 25 guys, or most of the time. We do not have an aide full-time, although we are running a TAC unit, which has a lieutenant/safety officer and a firefighter, which fills in some of the roles now while the COVID is still going on. So we get a little bit of help. During the day, we get some staff guys helping out, but for the most part, it's just the guy in a car for the command staff for the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so. I don't want to take up a lot of our time here, so I'm going to toss the ball over to Chris and Matt and let them talk.
All right. So who do I have next? I got, I think Matt. Yep, Matt Palmer. So I just hit what, 26 in Stanford?
Yeah, you're obviously paying attention on Facebook. Yeah,
Well, that's where I stole this picture from. So
okay. Well,
so go ahead, Matt.
One of my Euro helmet, which I don't have. Yeah, 26 years in Stanford. I'm currently a deputy chief, shift commander for Group 2. Previously served as the deputy chief of training for about 3 years. Prior to that was captain, lieutenant, obviously firefighter. It's my 33rd year in the fire service. Worked for the Brantford Fire Department previous and was a volunteer out in Guilford. Just a little bit about Stanford. For those that don't know, it's the third most populated city in the state. We have about 134,000 residents and growing every day. Anybody who goes 95 south or north, depending on where you're heading, can't miss what's going on down there. We're building like mad, as most of Fairfield County is. So our population continues to rise. It's still a pretty unique city in that you can see a fairly urban downtown and tower cranes and high rises going up. And you could drive to North Stanford and think you were somewhere in the middle of Vermont with some of the streets in a large area that's non-hydrant. So you, as a shift commander, can literally be working a high-rise incident in the morning, and you could go to a fire in the evening in an area that has no hydrants, and you're dealing with a tanker shuttle from multiple towns. So it's a pretty interesting place to work from that aspect. Just real quick, as far as our shift, I do have an aide, which is a blessing. I know a lot of departments don't. I know Bernie and Chris juggle a lot, but we do ride with an aide. I supervise 13 companies, and our shift strength is minimum of 54, 55 if you count our communication supervisor. And that's me in a nutshell. And I'll pass it over to Chris and just say hello to everybody and look forward to a good discussion tonight.
Well, Chris, I probably have the least amount to make fun of you for, other than that. So tell us about your Christmas this year.
So if you noticed, I'm probably not OSHA compliant with fit testing. So sitting next to me is a little tiny puppy dog. Christmas morning, everybody was sitting around the breakfast table and said, hey, puppy decided she needed to go outside. I jumped up being the fatherly guy and I said, oh, no, I'll take him. You enjoy the breakfast. Walked outside, never tied my sneakers and fell off the sidewalk and ended up breaking my fibula. Originally thought 3 spots, but just 1. So that's good. Did some damage in there. So I'm on the sidelines.
But it's no big deal because you're just going to go get your master's while you're on medical leave, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's all I do now is homework. So
it's a good thing.
Yeah. Lemons out of lemonade, or a lemonade out of lemons, right?
There you go. So anyway, about your actual career, we'll actually do that too.
All right. So 30 years in Milford. Started there, was a volunteer a little bit before that in Shelton. Kind of grew up in there with my brother. Got on to Milford, took a couple different tests, got on. Currently right now, I am a battalion chief, but Matt went back down to the floor. I decided to fill some gaps and go upstairs. I currently am the chief of safety training and also planning. So everything rolled into one down there. Kind of like Bernie said, similar to Danbury, about 25 square miles. We're along the shoreline, about 55,000 people. Our contract shift strength is 25 individuals. Right now, because of COVID, we've upstaffed. So we're running 27 now, and that comes into having 3 transport ambulances rather than 2 transporting ambulances. So 25, 27 on a shift. We're looking at 3 engines, 2 quints, a ladder, a shift commander. I do not have an aide, so I am definitely envious of I hear stories, and sometimes I don't know how to do everything and keep everything organized and keep the kittens in the sandbox, as people say. So Dan, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it's going to be a good night.
Well, thank you guys. So why did we put together this seminar? Well, Matt Palmer had started texting me a few months ago and saying, why isn't there an attached garage fire class? And pretty much when someone asked me why there isn't something, I generally try to come up with that. So while I didn't want to just sit here and lecture about it, and I thought that we could, bring some knowledge and backgrounds into it, it kind of got me thinking that there really isn't one. And, you know, the more reading I do, the more, you know, research and whatnot, the attached garage fire, I think, can go in line with smoothbore versus fog, rear mount versus mid mount. You know, it could be debated all day. So
Euro versus New Yorker.
So it used to be always the line went between the victims and the fire. It used to always be attack from the unburned side. And we know that a lot of that's changed in the last few years. Not that it's changed that we don't want to protect the victims, but just that we're attacking fires in some cases a little bit differently than we used to. And there's no universal answer for every department and every fire. So I hope no one from a small rural department comes back and says, well, this is how they do it in downtown Stamford, so this is what we should do. And I hope no one, you know, vice versa, well, this is how they do it in a rural area, so this is how we should do it. You got to know what your department is, what resources you have, and take it from there. Like I said, rather than—
Dan, can I just interrupt for a minute?
Yeah, please, absolutely.
So you bring up a really good point. Oftentimes in the firehouse, around the kitchen table, an individual says one thing, and I've noticed recently we tend to not take their side or not even look at their perspective of things. So I'm curious, especially with Matt. You know, he says, you know, 1 second he's downtown, the next area he's traveling up north. There's no hydrants. They're doing drafting, if they even have any type of remote water supply. I remember doing some classes down there, and those guys took us, and I'm like, are we still in the United States the way they're traveling? So it's kind of unique. So people need to see everybody's side of the story. And I got the dogs barking in the background.
That's all right. Yeah, and I think, and one of the reasons that I think you three are good for tonight is hopefully you won't all agree on everything, and yet you won't want to, you know, kill each other. I was gonna say pull each other's hair out, but there's only one that might work for, and I'm including myself in that. So, you know, disagreements are okay, and that's something that in general in life I wish we could get past a little bit and disagree and realize that there's different opinions out there. So, like I said, rather than throw scenarios out all night, we want to give, at least my intention is to give the decision makers watching some things that they can focus on for their fires and be able to, you know, take back to their department. So, yeah. Yep.
And just kind of echoing what Chris said, as far as, you know, looking at other people's operations. I just want to probably go on a record and say, and I don't think anybody in this discussion is going to be guilty of that, but phrases like must always, you know, you have to do this, this is guaranteed to work. I don't buy into that. You know, we're not so unique that, you know, our fires are very much different, but our operations are. And I can't say that the Stamford way is going to work in Milford or Danbury or Killingworth or Easton. And I think it's good that we have a forum like this, because let's face it, I mean, in a lot of other types of businesses, when there's a process that's being designed or something's executed, or even in sports, well, after I guarantee you that, you know, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, whoever, Green Bay, they're all going back and looking at yesterday's games, and they're trying to critically think how things went right or went wrong. And I don't think we do that enough in the fire service. You know, in my organization, we do in staff meetings, and we sometimes beat each other up pretty good. But as much as it's sometimes painful to review your fire for what you did do right, and more importantly, what you didn't do right, you do learn from it. So a discussion like this, whether we're talking about a garage fire, whether we're talking about smoothbore versus fog, I wish we could do it more often than fire service. I wish I could have other people look at my fires and say, okay, you know, what would Milford have done? Or maybe somebody from Bridgeport says, hey, you know, you ever try this? Because we don't do it enough. And a lot of times we just pass on a good job, and that's an awfully low bar. So yeah. It's definitely a good opportunity for us to discuss things and be really kind of objective in how we talk about the different ways we do it.
And Dan,
Matt, okay, Dave, go ahead, Bern.
The other thing I wanted to say too, both of them allude to it, I'll bring it up, is that, you know, this isn't a career thing either, career versus volunteer. I'm still a big volunteer. I go to a lot of fires in Litchfield County as a coordinator, but Danbury, like Stamford, like Milford, they have multiple personalities. So exactly. As Chris pointed out, 1 minute I can be at a fire in an urban area in Danbury with no one that speaks English, and 5 minutes later, we're at a mansion up in the North End. And the big difference I see lately, and maybe the last couple of years, you know, if we had had this class 10 years ago and I had said, you know, someday Richfield's going to go mutual aid to Torrington, I would have been institutionalized at Fairfield Hills 5 minutes later. And now it's not unusual for Danbury or Stamford or Milford to go mutual aid. I just saw the pictures today of East Haven. There's, I think every Haven that exists was at the fire in East Haven yesterday, as long as a couple of Brantfords. So, you know, we're all in this together. I think the fire service has changed tremendously since I started. And, you know, we will go, I had 2 fires in the last month in Danbury where the next town's tanker coming from a volunteer station got there before our second due and literally saved the day because there's no hydrants. So, you know, if you're not buying into helping each other out, then it's probably time to hit the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's delve into some of this. So what I'm going to do is general garage fire thoughts, and I'll just kind of throw all these points up here. And if you guys, you know, take turns, go through it. But just hearing fire and attached garage, what goes through your mind? Has your initial thought process for these fires changed in recent years? And if so, why? Since all 3 of you are shift commanders or have been shift commanders, what do you expect from and what actions do you want from your first due company officer? And this would be more of the assuming that it's a first due company that is not quartered with you. So the engine gets there a few minutes before you. What are you expecting from that first due engine officer or truck officer? And then probably the biggest discussion point for the night is going to be what is your main considerations for where your first line should go. And then don't worry about the last one. We'll delve into that in the next few slides. So with the 4 bullet points out there, we'll start with Chris. Why don't you kind of run through what your thoughts on those are?
Some really good stuff there, Dan. If you look at what I think about when I hear a garage fire, like Matt was saying, a lot of times at the beginning of shift change, you start looking at what your people are. And, you know, you kind of know, is the fire going to go good or fire going to go bad? And what do I need to do? You know, like you said, you know, the Chiefs in Tampa Bay, and they're trying to figure out what their game plan is going to be. My initial thought process changed drastically. I'm not really sure. So I got promoted in 2012 to battalion chief. My very first second alarm fire was an attached garage fire and had a Mayday in it. And, you know, it just, everything that could, water supply problems, everything that could have been thrown out. It was like an assessment center test. So that's a good foundation to really think about. It's not just a garage fire. It could be anything. And we really have to do that, you know, size up, whether you're using Wallace was hot, Cole was wealth. These are the things as you're driving to the call. And that's why I envy Matt and Bernie, you know, to have that aide sit there and you're sitting there going through your tactical worksheet on the way there. That's a huge thing, huge. You know, the third bullet point, what do I expect from the company officers? I think the most important thing for the initial arriving company officer is to do a good size up and a 360 size up. I want to say if anything, I have to talk to company officers more about like their first fire. It's really not doing that good 360, you know, walk around the building or at least get a good 3 sides and base their initial tactics on that 360. So first main consideration of the first lines, you know, back again, RECOVS. What are we doing? You know, I saw one of the questions before and we'll answer it later, but, you know, am I looking to contain the fire? Am I looking to attack the BTUs? Am I looking for rescue? That's the big thing that we'll start getting into later. So
cool. Awesome. Matt, you want to hit it?
Yeah, I mean, not far off at all. First thing I'm looking at is time of day. 3 o'clock in the morning versus 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm extremely concerned about progress. 3 o'clock in the morning, more than likely, that was an undiscovered fire for a period of time. Maybe it was somebody driving by. Maybe it was somebody, the detector finally, smoke weed through and the detector finally went off. Maybe it was discovered by a neighbor who saw a glow after the fire had already extended up into the attic space. So that time of day is critical. The one I most recently had was, I think, at 12:30 in the morning, or around midnight. So, the fire had a head start, and we're already behind the 8 ball. I don't care what our tactics are. If the fire has a significant lead before discovery, we're going to have a tough time. Just some of the other things, obviously, initial size up is key. As Chris said, your players are important. Your A team, you're probably going to get a great size up. You're going to get the 360. You're going to get your expectations met as a boss, as far as giving them instructions as far as what should happen. It may not be your A team, and you may have a poor size up or no size up, which still happens, or an attack line that's grossly undersized for what you're dealing with. So you're already behind the ball. And in my case, it could be a hydrant versus non-hydrant. If I'm in a hydrant area, a lot of an entire layer plan that we have to deal with goes away. If it's a non-hydrant, then obviously there's an entire operation that's going to run concurrently to this that I cannot manage as the incident commander while I'm trying to do tactics. But that's also something that has to get also begin. And then obviously, as far as location of one of the things, and we may talk about it more, is just the footprint of the house. I am fortunate that I don't have to drive, so I have an iPad with tablet command, which is a great tool. I have an MDT, and if need be, I can use my cell phone and look at things like Google Maps and stuff like that. And sometimes we're fortunate where we have time where you could even pull up a street shot and look at potentially what you're going to, but you can certainly look at an overhead and look at where the garage may be on a house based upon the last satellite map we have of the property. And you can start getting, looking at if there's a pool, property layout. So I have that opportunity, depending on how much time is involved in a response, to start using that data positively to kind of paint the picture for myself before the first engine gets on scene.
Cool. Bernie, what do you got?
I couldn't probably say it better myself. What these guys said. I want to. The key here is that first due company officer. That guy's going to make or break you. Most of the time, they make us. They didn't get promoted because they're no good in any of these towns or cities. I think Matt brings up a great point with the technology today. We have MDTs and all that too. When I jump in the car, I have an iPad Pro. It's a monster next to me now, and it does have a screenshot of the house and a map of where the hydrants are and so forth. So the second Duke, if you take the layer off of your hydrant areas, that's a great point. But, I want to go back to the company officer. The company officer, that is a very difficult job. When you're pulling up, you have maybe 3 guys or 4 guys if you're lucky, and you're going to be on your own for 5, 6, 10 minutes with just those 3 guys. You've got some hard decisions to make. Do you attack the fire? Do you effect a rescue? Do you plan for the next step? Is the ladder truck got to get in here? So that guy has got his hands full. And, luckily in most of these towns around here, somebody's, somewhere on your heels. Water supply changes a lot of the decision-making process. If you have a tanker, we look at these big city fires and, they pull in 2.5s and blitz fires and so forth. 2 guys on a line can't move a 2.5 that easy. So maybe a straightforward tip on initiative 3/4 is the way to go. They can be mobile with that. They can hit the fire and knock it down and sorry about that, and move into the fire and do a transitional attack. But there's a lot to think about on the way to these things. The other thing, I'll make mention now, but we'll talk about it, I'm sure later on, is what are you going to? As Matt said about Stanford growing, Danbury's probably growing faster. We've put up probably 4,000 or 5,000 condos in the last few years. They have garages under them, and they're 12 units long. Or we have a high-rise project now that's 8 stories over 2 stories of parking garages. So, you know, what are we going to? We going to, you know, fire in a garage? Is that a, you know, parking garage and, you know, below grade garage? Is it in a row of townhouses? So, you know, you have a lot of thinking to do for that first due company and for the IC that's coming, you know, the command officers coming from maybe a little bit farther away.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. And I think for argument's sake for tonight, we'll be talking about garage fires in residential structures, but without a doubt, you know, a garage, you know, a parking garage under a high rise or something is gonna, you know, can be a issue for some places.
And the other point too, in all these places, all these 3 towns, at least we're talking about, and all the towns out there, you know, and there's a couple of towns represented here that have some of these places. When somebody causes my garage is on fire, so you're in North Stamford or North Danbury or Norfolk's out there, well, shout out to Norfolk. Does the house have more than one garage? Is there a carport? You know, when you say garage, I say garage, I've got a 2-car garage hooked to my house. Somebody else might have a 5-car carriage house in a 10,000 square foot house. So it's really imperative that you get the information of what are you going to, or you know your district. If you're going to a place that's a, you know, 3,000 foot long driveway and they have a 6-car carriage house, that's a whole different scenario. So it's
the old one. My baby's trapped, and on one hand it could be a baby, on the other hand it could be a dog, on the other hand it could be their 30-year-old 300-pound kid that still lives at home. So, you know, you got to put it all into perspective. So without a doubt. So what I'd like to do is jump into some of the garage locations, and we'll go through some pictures of you know, and discuss how what size up considerations that changes when we get into where the garage is located. So the three main ones we'll discuss would be garages on the same grade with no life hazard above, meaning no second floor to that. Garages on the same grade as the front door. When I say same grade, I mean the same grade as like the main floor of the front door, but with a potential life hazard above. And then garages that are actually on a different grade, on a lower grade from the main structure. And then obviously, as always, there are your outliers. So these are a few examples of garages that, although these houses are all completely different, if you look at the definition of a attached garage on the same grade as your main entrance with no life hazard directly above it, I think all 4 of these kind of fit that bill. So I'll start with Matt. I don't have specific questions with this. So looking at these, what are some considerations that you take away if you pull up? And obviously there's always going to be variables. And as Chris said, you're going to do a 360, but what are some of the main points? And one thing we'll talk about when we do the simulations, I really only have the front simulated because what I wanted to do was really take the decision-making from when you're getting off of that truck. And we'll discuss what might you see in the rear that would change your decisions. But for the attached garage fires, I guess the way I would say it is you're not going to turn around to your crew and say, hey, sit in the rig and don't do anything until I do my 360. So you're still going to have them start to do something. So what is that something? And we can always change it from there once you do your 360 and realize someone's hanging out the back window or something like that. So Matt, garages on the same grade with nothing above, what considerations do you have for that?
So I'll look at the house in our upper left, the cream colored house, and I don't care where you're logging in from in Connecticut, that house probably exists in your first due, maybe multiple times over. A couple of things just to think about too, because we don't do this a lot, right? So we're having a discussion about tactics and garage fires, but I'd ask how many of the participants, like how often has their organization done this? This is a common fire for us. Madison had a job like that last night. And it was a good stop. It was a house. It was a raised ranch, but it had a house similar to the offset garage that in our upper hand left corner.
Matt, I'll just stop you on that because I have those pictures. We're going to hit that in a couple of slides, so you go through that in depth.
And my point being is just taking in mind that within your organizations we do a lot of training. my career, I've done a lot of training on things that I've never seen, scenarios. We spent a lot of time on things that they're like unicorns. It could happen, but this is something that does happen and happens frequently. Any day of the week, you could pick up you're on a buff group, or you're getting your buff pages or whatever, and you're seeing these type of fires occur. So I just, these kind of scenarios are thing that, a lot of companies should be doing. Looking at that house up there, position is big. Position is not a tactic. It's a condition. It's a factor that we find, that we deal with. I think your success in the operation has to deal with the footprint of the house. The house on the upper left-hand corner, I've got reasonably good success if I have tactics that we're going to be able to contain this. And again, duration's another thing. If this fire is discovered early and doesn't have a big head start and doesn't get up into the garage and then extend up, the delta side of the house on the second floor, then I've got reasonably good success. But Dan, I don't know how deep we want to dive into this as far as the hypotheticals on this, but I look at a house like that as having one that we're with a reasonably good tactic here. We should have good success because the footprint of the house is advantageous to keeping the fire somewhat confined to the area of origin.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I think in general, just when you don't have anything above it, you could have fire shooting. I think the big thing here is you could have fire shooting 50 feet up into the air. You're not worried about an auto exposure situation above. So,
yeah, without a doubt. And that's, in most of our garage doors, if we look at construction, when I bought my house, we had these thick, heavy doors, which, the motors hate them. You get rid of them. They're not efficient, but most of our doors are real lightweight. If you're not familiar with them, I mean, they're vinyl clad, they're insulated. If there's a substantial fire in that garage, those doors are not going to be around for long, and so once you have the failure of that door, all that pressure in a fire is a giant pressure situation. That pressure is going to be relieved out those doors. You have great vent holes. Position is great. If there's not a livable space above it, well, then you're going to have a good success that most of that pressure is going to vent up to as Dan said, 40, 50 feet above. However, if it's not one of the houses pictured here, obviously everything is going to go straight up to the other combustible areas or the living spaces, which is an entirely different scenario.
Yeah. Chris, what do you have for these types of any specific points that weren't really hit on with this? You're muted.
There you go. All right, much better. One of the things I've seen where we sometimes make some mistakes is that frontage, the distance from the road to the house. It could be 25 feet, it could be 100 feet. And, like Matt was saying, we tend to train on, the sexy things and the cool things, but when was the last time an engine company sometimes stretched their regular hose and get good at stretching hose? We all have pre-connects, and sometimes that 150-foot pre-connect may not, Matt's talking about the house in the upper left-hand corner. That 150-foot pre-connect is probably not going to do a good job in that house. And I see us sometimes getting stuck because the house is so far away from us.
Okay. Bernie, what do you have for garages, nothing above?
Well, I agree with those guys. I think it's kind of it's a good way to go over things. As Matt said, I think I'm just going to maybe go off the tactics for us, or add something to the tactics for a second. You have to know what you can do. If you're showing up in Stanford, first alarm with, 20 guys, or Bridgeport with 30 guys, that's a different scenario than, we'll shout out to Westport. I know they're out there and you're pulling up with a 2-man engine. So the tactics might change because you've got fire showing out of one of these garage bay doors. The best thing you can do is hit the fire. All the other problems go away if you put the fire out. You might not have, as Matt alluded to, enough guys to stretch 250 feet of hose down this driveway through the front door, take a right, push down a hallway and push it out the garage door while somebody else who isn't there is trying to vent the thing. I also like Matt's comment about the bay doors. I went to one here in Bridgewater a couple months ago, just like this. Fire's raging in the garage and somebody's pounding on it with a Halligan tool. I knew it was a vinyl door. I handed the guy a chainsaw. He cut through it like paper. The door came down, the fire went out. So, I think again, that first due company, the first due officer, whoever's making the decisions, decide what are we going to do? We're going to try to, you know, if you've got people in this house we're picking on up on the left-hand corner, if there's possibly people up in the bedroom and that garage is ripping at 2 a.m, you're going to have to go through the front door and keep it away from the people so somebody can go rescue them. But if it's in the middle of the afternoon and it's, you know, 3 of you pulling up, your best bet might be to just hit that fire. So again, I don't know if there's a right answer or a wrong answer most for every single scenario, but you know, all of these are you know, good scenarios to look at to give yourself some thoughts, you know, to think about how you might attack these types of fires.
Yeah, I think all good points. And I mean, there's not a ton to discuss with these other than to do some of the simulations. But when you add in something like this, where again, you have the garages on the same grade, so the same plane, but now you're adding in some sort of life hazard above. How does that change? And, you know, we'll say for most of these, you have heavy fire showing out of the garage. You don't have, you know, little seeping smoke. So you have what is obvious, a car on fire, spreading to the contents, whatever that case may be. So how does that, having that livable space above, change what you may do with that first due company or first couple of companies and line placement and whatnot?
Let me jump into this one since I'm right here too. The one that bothers me on these 4 is the lower left, because that garage it's a single bay, wide bay, probably a wide span across there. So that's engineered lumber up there that's giving you a wide area. So that's going to pique my interest, that if there's a lot of fire in there, that's not going to be the same fire you have in a, you know, an old farmhouse with an attached garage. You know, you're going to be limited in your time to get up to that second floor and get people out, or if the place is going to collapse around the trusses. So that one, of all these scenarios, I can't see where the yellow garage is because the people are in the way, but that one begins to concern me more than the others.
Okay.
It also has, if you look at the footprint of it, it also has an unusually high ceiling because of the height of it. But you also, and obviously, you know, your gases go up, you got a finished area above it, so you got a rock ceiling, but it's going to hold a lot of fire gas. So if that's going, you're going to have a spectacular event. It's going to look like the entire neighborhood's on fire, when in reality it's not, but you're probably going to have an incredible amount of gases venting. And yeah, that and the one directly above, or I'd say also would be of greatest concern.
Chris?
Yeah, Bernie brings up a good point, lightweight construction. If you look at all these houses, they're relatively newer. I'm looking at the upper left-hand one, and even though that's probably the oldest of the 3, I immediately picture an area in Milford. It's called Lexington Green, and it is just probably the shoddiest type of construction. And every time we have a good fire in there, we usually end up with someone, you know, poking their foot through the floor. Just because of that lightweight construction. So that really has to, you know, be thought of as you're going through that front door, as you're going above the fire, just how long, you know, Matt made a good thing, you know, progress. What's the progress of the fire? Is it 3 o'clock in the morning? Is it 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Plays a big, huge part in our decision process. You know, I'm sure we'll get into this discussion later, and, you know, maybe we'll get some input from the audience and stuff, but you know, if that fire, you know, you said heavy fire showing from all these garages on arrival, you know, with the limited amount of manpower that we have, and it could be in Stanford too, sometimes knocking some of those BTUs down, putting that heavy fire down is a good thing. Initially, low manpower, we said like Westport, and then, you know, knocking it down a little bit, then getting inside and doing the rest of the stuff that you need to do as far as, you know, RECOBS.
So looking at and I guess my question is, I think a big issue with these houses could be auto exposure. So if you have fire coming out of the garage, auto exposure would be, you know, it getting the fire lapping up and getting into the windows above it. All of these look like vinyl siding, so it could certainly take off on the siding aspect. So how do you, and maybe you don't have an answer and you would just have to judge it fire versus fire, but how do you balance letting that auto exposure happen and immediately stretching the line into the front door versus knocking down that auto exposure and maybe some fire and then stretching that line into the front door? Chris, you went last, so I'll just start with you.
Yeah. Different for every fire. It takes us a while for everything to get into play. But majority of the time, the pump operators do a fantastic job. They get water into the nozzle. If it's auto exposing up into that, where the wreath is, that's a bedroom. That's probably the master bedroom. With that amount of fire going up there and knowing what I know about that building construction, I say hit it, darken it down a little bit, shut your line down, then move in that front door. See what you have. That initial knockdown of the fire will give, whether it's the second due company or the incident commander, when he gets on the scene, he'll be able to kind of size up again and look to see where that fire is going. If all I see is this big glow coming out that blue door, by the time I get in there, what else is going to happen? So if I can get water into that line quickly, knock it down, I'm a big component of that.
Yeah. Bernie, what do you think? Auto exposure versus going into the front door?
Again, I like Chris's comment there that you have to make a decision, and oftentimes things change as the initial crew is attacking the fire. And I just saw this maybe a week or two ago. It was a garage fire. Wasn't quite attached, but it was only about a foot off the house. And it was really ripping in the middle of the night where the Euro helmet picture was taken. And I wasn't the IC, I was safety. But these plastic gas cans melted down in the course of the fire. And it was, the only fire I've seen like that comparatively were plane crashes. There was a running gasoline fire. So, it's that if that first due guy says, we're going to try to go in the front door and push it out. And as you pull up in the car or the second due or the truck, and all of a sudden, there's flammable liquids pouring out of the garage, things change. You might have to change your tactics. This big garage looks like it has a walk-through door near the front door there. I'm a big proponent of knocking some of the BTUs down, put the fire out. All the other problems will go away. Again, it depends on your manpower. If you're pulling up with 12, 15 guys, it might be a lot easier to put a line through the front door and push it out. It might be even possible to put a second line on it.
Hey, Bernie, in your career, how many times have you gone into garages and they've been neat and organized?
Never.
Certainly not mine.
And especially now, you talk about now, everybody has motorcycles and snowmobiles and 3 cars. And, I think about my garage, propane barbecues that get stored in there, everything. So, a garage fire these days is a very hazardous undertaking. And, I don't know as if I'm a real big fan all the time of just going through the front door and try to find the pass-through door and push it out without at least cooling it off a little and slowing it down to see what you have. I would say in my career, Chris, and I'm sure you two have the same thing, these fires probably 90% of the time started with a car in a garage. There's the other 10% that were, started by something else, the furnace or ashes from the fireplace. But most of the time it's a car burning in the garage, which presents its own problems. If you've got a car in there with titanium or an electric car or whatever, these are very hazardous situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Hey,
Matt, oh yeah, Chris, go.
Just really, I'm sorry to cut Matt off, but I'm looking at these houses. The houses on the left, I see as being different than the houses on the right.
Yep, I think I was going to hit on this too. So go ahead.
Yeah, the houses on the right, I'm picturing basically 2 boxes for that house. Where the house on the left that we're talking about, the upper left, that's one big box to me. But my tactics, I think, would definitely be different dealing with the houses on the right-hand side because of the garage, the construction. You know, Matt talked about the garage door hopefully still being closed and taking that size up. Well, what I'm seeing, is that front door open and the smoke's pouring out the front door. All right, maybe it's a little bit different. But I think we're looking at two different types of structures, the ones on the left and then the ones on the right. Matt, what do you have?
I think I'm in the same neighborhood. Just to talk two things about origins, and Bernie brought up a good point as far as, often car. Also often I found, in addition to a vehicle fire mechanical issue, you've got a high likelihood that someone took ashes, if they're burning in a fireplace, cleaning a fireplace, but fireplace ashes commonly put in the garbage because they thought they were cool. Another great source. And then also combustible rags. The floor guy was working, he put his bags there, or somebody was doing a project and didn't realize that the rags were going to be an issue. So those are all good things. But yeah, there's no doubt what we're putting in our garages far exceeds what you would have seen 30, 40 years ago. They're loaded. It's just like all our homes, our basements. We've overfueled these boxes. As Chris is talking, they're highly overfueled boxes, and they're going to be a spectacular event when part of that box is in fire conditions. I'm a big proponent of trying to stall this motor. I said earlier that the fire is this, it's a fantastic energy event. It's a high pressure event, and we have to go at it and stall the motor. I don't need you to put out every lick of fire. I don't expect you to do that. But you should have an understanding that in a high fire volume, venting out, we need to make a good hit to stall that motor down. We can still get our surgical strike, but I think if we get too hooked up into thinking that this is a wildland fire, we're going to do this flank attack and we're going to come through the back door in this thing, we lose a lot of time. We don't have time. And we may have already lost a lot of time because of time of day. But we need to act fast. And if I'm the incident commander and I'm expecting a blitz attack of some sort, however you guys get there, I need you to act fast. This isn't a 3-4 minutes, let's get water on it. I need you to have water flowing in a minute. And so somewhere in your training and operation should be, how do we get water flowing in a minute? And companies should be training in that. That'll depend on how you set your machines up. But I would just echo everybody else. I think we're on the same page as far as our primary concerns here.
So I'll say two things before we go on to the next set of garages. So Chris, what I was actually going to say is a little bit different from you, but in the same ballpark. The difference for me with the ones on the left versus the right is if I hit it, this is the question I ask myself. If I hit it from the outside first, will it delay me getting into that front door? In this one, I'm almost at the front door if I were to hit this from the outside. In this one, I'm a few feet back from the front door. So if I take 15, 20 seconds to hit this and then go in my opinion, it's not delaying you that much. In one of these, where the garage is maybe 75 feet away from the front door, if I only have 2 or 3 guys on my rig, if I have to come over here, hit it, and then stretch the line all the way back to the front door, in my mind, that is delaying us getting the line into the front door inside. And so then that changes, well, do I want to delay it that much? That's my opinion is when the garage is right there next to the front door, I think it makes it a lot easier in my mind. Like your old crazy Chief Chapman used to say, the 7 to 10 second stream check. Now we know we could use that to put some water into the window, into the fire, into the garage in this case, and at least darken it down a little bit. And then I think Bernie said, make a decision and stick with it. And that's the biggest thing I've learned as an officer. There's someone on this logged in tonight, and he always used to say paralysis through analysis. And if you just sit there and try to decide, am I going to do this? Am I going to do this? You're going to end up doing nothing. And he said that during a Fire One class, and I've never forgotten it. So, and that goes for any incident. Make a decision and stick with it. That's not just garage fires, but that's my take on these. The left versus the right is where the garage is located. Will it delay me getting the line in that front door? Because in the end, that's what we need to do. It's just a question of, do we do that first, or do we do that after we knock down the exterior fire? So
I would submit there's 2 ways to look at that, Dan. You're thinking at it as a delay to get to the front door. I look at it probably just the opposite.
As a delay to get water on the fire.
It's a delay to get water on a fire because, and you have to be realistic and true to yourself here.
Absolutely.
This fire up on the left, it's a, 18 square foot house. No big deal for 3 guys two guys to hit that garage fire and go through the front door. The one down in the lower right, it's a 4,500 square foot house probably. And two guys are, you know, and they watch, social media and see the big cities dragging a 2.5 across the yard and hitting this thing and then redeploying it to the front. Forget about it. You're not going to be able to do it. So if you hit it, you make a decision. You want to try the front door, or do you want to try to put the fire out from the outside by the garage door? You know, this house in the lower right, a two-man company is not going to be able to do both, but you might be able to hold the fire while the second crew is going to go through the front door and make the push down the hall.
All right, so we'll go to garages and below grade now. So now what we're showing is 4 different houses. The garages, well, in these cases, all happen to be facing the A side, although there are some that face other directions. But the big difference here now is that the garage is actually on the basement level, or at least a few steps down. So in essence, you're facing a garage, you're basically attacking a car fire below grade now if you choose the front door. So having a garage on a lower level from where your main entrance is, how does that change where you want that first line to go? How does that change your tactics or your thought process? So Matt, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, so my initial observation is that my degree of success, and we all measure success differently, but my level of success goes down, opportunity goes down dramatically because of location. And that's not something I can control, it's something I have to deal with. I'm still going at, and I'll pick the house upper right-hand corner, that looks like probably a relatively lightweight construction, newer construction house. But that garage, you know, what's right above it? It's probably a dining room. Maybe it's a suite on the first floor, bedroom suite. But if that garage is heavily venting, and it will, those windows are not going to last long. And it's also, that looks primarily vinyl. Well, vinyl is going to produce a pretty brilliant result. That house is going to look like it's fully involved. And I'm sure they'll say that the house is fully involved. Well, no, it's not fully involved. The front of the house is, you know, well involved, or the combustibles are well involved in fire. But even more so, this is one that if you tried your flanking tactical surgical maneuver to go through the front door and then go down the stairs, forget it. You've lost too much time. There's too much unknown about the floor plan. That's one where you really better have your game together and go at that garage right away and at least darken it down. And that being said, it's one of those things from a company drill opportunity was, when your companies go out or you give it to your officers to come out and go upon, figure out drills for themselves, which is also often interesting. But when was the last time they just did a quick water drill? Whether it be through a blitz fire, again, whatever device you're using, depending on how your machines are set up, using a 2.5, or even using your deck gun, and maybe you have a deck gun with a shutoff valve, but just doing that drill. I can assure you that we do drills all the time on circumstances that rarely, if ever, happen. But when was the last time we did a time drill just to see how quickly they could get, you know, one? And again, Blitzfire, Ram, the Akron Mercury, those are single firefighter devices. Those aren't, we need 4 guys or 5 guys like some firefighters think. Those are single firefighter deployment devices that can give you a decent GPM and very good control. But when was the last time companies went out and just did that basic drill? They don't need the drill field to do. They can do it in any parking lot in a watch to time themselves. But something like this is that, you know, if that decision, when it's made that we're going to go quick attack on that, we better hope that that crew understands and is capable of doing what the officer wants. Because if they don't, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you've touched on the blitz fire and or, you know, a similar device to that. So my question is, what's your opinion on stretching the blitz fire and doing that? If you stretch a one-man device like that, you're not taking that in, obviously. So how do you grade, you know, stretching something like that, where you then have to stretch a second line versus just stretching one line, using it down in the garage, and then stretching into the front door?
So here's your company drill, even with a 3-person engine company. And my city has the luxury of 4-person companies. So I'm not going to sound arrogant and say it's easy for everybody. And I know different departments, volunteer departments, it may be 1 or 2 firefighters initially stepping off. But that drill should take place. Can one firefighter effectively stretch your blitz or your your mercury device and get water flowing? The answer is yes. Do they know to break the line? You know, you may have a pre-connected 400-foot blitz. It's ridiculous. You're not going to use that for this, you know, any of these houses. You probably need a 50-foot, maybe 100-foot comfortably. What's the effect? Does anybody bother to look at the effective range? How long was my tank going to last? Do we time our tanks? Those are drills that company officers should be doing, and they should be doing them not because they want that tactic, but the firefighters have to have the comfort level of doing it. I found in a couple of times when I requested a blitz, it didn't get done. And when we went back and did a review as to why it wasn't pulled, one of the answers I got was we weren't comfortable doing that. Well, that's not an acceptable answer. There's no reason why a company officer can't take his firefighters out and flow water with a blitz fire anywhere there's a hydrant or time in your tank. So that's something that not every department is going to do well, but you know, realistically, one firefighter, or conversely, a pump operator, if you have your deck gun set up, and more departments are starting to put a gate valve on their deck gun, effectively, if you're in a volunteer department, you roll up on that, you're by yourself and you're the pump operator, you could theoretically get up on top, and that's a drill you should practice, and use the gate you could make an effective attack that way. It is conceivably possible if you allow yourself to train on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernie, what do you think on garages below grade here?
I completely agree with Matt, especially from a first due standpoint. You know, this house up on the right is very much like houses we have in Danbury downtown, where you got to go up to go down. And, you know, again, two guys on that first due line, they can be the best guys you have. It's going to be a job to get across this yard, up the stairs, across the hallway, down the stairs, and into the garage. I'm a big fan of these blitz fires. I agree with Matt wholeheartedly that one guy can stretch 100 feet of 2.5, aim that thing. And again, you're going to get your money's worth. Okay. You're going to get the most bang for the buck. So if you've got a 750-gallon tank and there's 3 of you, and that garage up the upper right here is rocking, pull that blitz fire, sit on it, and let it rip. And the second due, you know, we all know we're going to have a backup line anyway. The second due, third due, they're going to have to pull another line and back it up. And so what? The fire goes out, you pick up the blitz fire just like everything else. So, you know, I'm a big proponent of put the fire out, all the other problems go away. You know, this, the one up on the upper left, you know, that's a raised ranch with the garage facing the other way, basically. You know, again, tough to get up that. The road is probably down, you know, 100 feet from the house, up the front steps, down the hall, find the garage, the cellar door. You know, the one on the lower left, you know, it's got skylights, so we don't need to cut holes in the roof. We'll just pop those. Again, a large garage, a 2-bay with 1 door. You know, no one, you know, in the old days when we all started, you know, they tested your metal by making you do cellar fire scenarios. Those days are pretty much over. So, you know, if you think you're going to crawl across this house and go down the cellar stairs and push, you know, 20 gallons of gasoline out the front door, I think you're probably mistaken.
I agree. Chris, what do you have for this? Oops, sorry. Hold on. Sorry, Chris, I muted you by accident. Just unmute yourself. I hit the wrong thing.
Better? Am I still there, Danny?
Yeah, you're good. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So one of the tactics that we use in Milford, I mean, we have blitz fires and everything like that. They occasionally come off, but one of our last apparatus that we received didn't really have a good pre-connect system. It was very challenging for the individuals to stretch hose off the apparatus. So being typical firefighters we are, hey, let's go to plan B. So they started using our high-rise packs more often. They stretch off the back, or, you know, the 3-inch line comes off the back with a gate. I'm looking at this situation and, you know, with Matt talking about the blitz fire, you know, pulling that 2.5 can almost do both duties. I can start to initially attack that fire, knock it down. Then the guys are pulling their high-rise packs, which we run 1 3/4 hose, connected to the 2.5, boom, off we go inside that front door. So leaving your options open and having a bunch of tools in your toolbox, that's probably something for the company officer. I like Matt, Matt's talking, how quick do I need to get water on the fire? Let's drill on this. I see really in Milford, it's one company that stretches 3-inch a lot because they don't want to stretch the pre-connects because they're a pain in the ass to pack back up.
Whatever works. Yeah, I mean, I look at these types of garages and I try to think of the outside, the far-fetched scenario. I can't think of a scenario where if I knew the fire was in the garage, I would take the first line in the front door without opening up that garage and putting water on the fire. It's like, it would be like stretching down a basement fire on a car fire. That doesn't sound, never mind fun, that doesn't sound doable to me, so
Dan,
I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, and I just add too, I mean,
Please.
just to clarify so we don't get accused of this, but if your first due company is expected to stretch the blitz, or at least one firefighter, again, depending on your staffing, my expectation is one firefighter is operating that blitz, and hopefully they know how to shoot the water. There's not a lot of water. We'll assume they're working off their tank, so they're going to have to make a good, be also accurate in where they're sending the stream. But the other 2 firefighters, or in my case, it would be 3 firefighters. But the simultaneous operation of that is we're stretching to that front door. We're still going to be looking at protecting stairs, all the other tactical priorities we have, but we're not going to be focused solely on that garage. I mean, that in my estimation should be one firefighter's responsibility, and simultaneously stretching. And if nothing else, so the second due engine company can pick up that line and advance it in. So we're really almost operating, within minutes of each other, if not sooner. So I just don't want to lose that opportunity. We're not saying forget about running up those stairs, but to me, one firefighter should be able to make that attack by themselves, and the other firefighters should be focused on laying out that other line.
Sounds good. Bernie or Chris, do you have anything else for garages under like this? Okay. So we'll look at some other. So I'm going to go through each of these individually. We'll just do quick, thoughts. But here we have a garage on the side. This is kind of what we were talking about in the last, a garage on the lower level, but also on the B side of a ranch, basically. So you don't have to, probably mostly of what we just talked about in the last one, but really not doable probably to use the same line that you would stretch to the garage also to go into the front door, I would think. But looking at this, what's above the garage here is almost definitely your bedrooms. So any chance you're bringing the first line in the front door, or is this, probably to the garage? Bernie, why don't you start?
I think, again, you've got to make a decision. This house, again, is way too complicated with the terrain to try to knock it down and make it up to the front door. So a coordinated transitional attack here with 2 lines, as Matt was just describing, is probably your way to go. If you've got, it's 2 in the morning, there's people in the house, then yeah, maybe you want to go through the front door and hold the cellar stairs until somebody can search for the people if they're not outside. But, I really do like darkening these fires down before you commit to the front door. If you've got a bunch of guys, then you can do both in rapid succession. Again, like Matt or Chris had said, if you're alone during the day in a town I live in, and it's just me on a pumper tanker, aim the gun at it and hope for the best. But again, this is a challenge. There's shrubs that are in the way here, this stone wall. So again, it's that first guy's decision, and it's not, you can't fault him. He's got to make a decision, and what he initially thinks is his tactic, you back him up, and then you make do from there.
All right. Chris, what do you have? Anything specific for this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna go against Bernie. I'm looking at this house. It's long. From past experience, I don't think there's a full basement in there. I think you got the garage, maybe a little area, and then it goes up. We definitely have the living areas on the right, the bedrooms on the left. I think if I'm pulling up to this at 3 o'clock in the morning. Back to what Matt says. I think I'm going through that front door. Older style house. I think I'm going to try to get to that hallway. And as a company officer, as the initial company officer, try to figure out what I see. And hopefully at 3 o'clock in the morning, the people are coming out and towards that front door. Maybe we're making some grabs. But in this situation, I think I'm going to go differently. And I'm going to go through that front door with an 1.75 line that's maneuverable. Of course, I'm going to weigh my, what's my second due? Is my second due coming? Are they a couple minutes behind me? If they are, it makes my decision a lot easier. As they're stretching the line, can I get a, check of the back to see what's going on? Is it a full basement or not? But, just thinking about that heavy fire in that garage, I think I'm going through the front door with the thought process of the hose line is going to be my best rescue tool at that second.
Yeah. Matt, what about you?
I'm probably back to the disagreeing with Chris a little bit. And I've been to a couple fires like this, not in Stamford, in another community. I went to one not too long ago, which started in a garage in a house just like this. And it was quickly an attic fire. And it kind of ran out of fuel in the garage, and it was pretty much consuming the attic space at that point. So that's the risk. I mean, a couple of things about this house, and I've had a few minutes to stare at it, so I'll have it all picked apart. Like look, middle of the night, it's dark, I can't see a squat. I'm not going to have the opportunity. But a lot of these large ranches, and I love these houses, classic 1960s style home, solid built home. But particularly with the setback or with the grade change, it probably has a finished basement, and it may have a very large finished basement. So, once you get down that stairs and commit to it, it may not be smooth sailing. If you get down, it's a giant playroom all the way up to the garage doors, then, you're going to be good to go. But this house could be trouble for you, trying to snake down those stairs and the unknown of what they did. And if they finished everything off, it could have quite a sophisticated maze just getting down there. So there is a lot of risk in that. But a lot of times in this style house, with that garage runs, you got vinyl siding right up there. It won't be long before you're more concerned with pulling ceilings than what's going on in the garage.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one. I think that, if it's at 3 a.m., I think you have there's three things with the victims. Either they're unconscious in their beds, they're out and meeting you on the front lawn, or they were attempting to escape and were overcome and are in the hallway. And if that happens, then, Chris's scenario is probably getting to them the first. If they're in bed and you need to get to them, then stretching the first line in the front door could potentially allow auto exposure to get into their bedroom. So who knows, now, Chris, were you planning on taking the line down the basement stairs, or were you mostly just going to keep it on the first floor while you did searches?
No, I agree with Matt. That's going to be a challenge trying to get down that basement stairs to attack it. My first thought would be just that line is protecting the first floor, protecting, whether it's the search crew or the attack crew doing the primary search, but protecting those guys. And if anything happens, that's when we start backing out.
10-4. All right. So the next one. So this, Matt, I threw this one in for you because this is what kind of you were talking about a lot, but we have a garage kind of set up forward from the front door. And I know that you wanted to address some of this stuff, so I'll let you kind of start the ball with this one.
And this is, again, we're not talking tactics, we're talking conditions. And this is a condition that you're going to find. But the location of this fire, and this is not uncommon, I'm sure, particularly when you look at townhomes or condos that are more maybe duplexes, you'll see this where the garage is forward. I think it gives you a great opportunity, because if your doors fail, what's venting is you have an attic space there. It's probably a fairly large attic space, and may or may not be finished off. But you do have a significant advantage because it's forward of the main body of the house. Chris said good about boxes. This is kind of box forward. My tactics are the same, but my opportunity for success goes up greatly Whereas we hit it first, and you obviously want to simultaneously be taking that line around, but you can almost kind of anticipate where your entrance to the garage is going to be. But the bulk of your fire in this containment box is forward of your house. And so something like this will hopefully give you a lot of success. But again, building construction being what it is, if it's open rafter, depending on how that, that roof line is set up, if it vents up into that attic, you don't have an effective initial knock on it, quickly all those gases and potential fire are going to be kind of traveling through the rest of the house, and you're going to have a light up elsewhere. But cool. I think this is just one to look at, that you do stand greatest success by having a footprint like this in your favor.
Bernie and Chris, do you guys have anything on this or nothing? I threw this in there because Matt had discussed it with me prior, but I don't know if you have anything specific different with this one.
Yeah, I like his concept. Matt, quick question for you. So heavy fires in this garage area, you're knocking that down. What's your second due company doing?
Stretching a line to the front door.
The front door?
It's not already stretched, but more than likely, heavy fire. I mean, we ideally want that first in company, but they're stretching to that front door.
Now, when do you say, hey, I need another line to go around to that Charlie side?
Would be as soon as, and again, I have the luxury. I'm pulling 5 engine companies. One's a rip, but we can advance that up if it became critical. I have the companies. I have 24, 26 people on an initial alarm, and plenty more to go. Another 20 that are standing by if we need them. So again, to get 3 lines off is not a challenge for us, but that's Stanford. It's not, Derby or whoever, somewhere else, even in Simsbury or somewhere like that. They're not going to have the ability to pull 3 lines very quickly. But yeah, you're right. I mean, another line off your B side would be definitely warranted. And, there may be some sort of mudroom door or some other access door on that B side, more than likely. But for me, that's a pretty easy call.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Bernie, anything specific with this one or not?
No, but just this looks like a lot of houses and townhouses in Danbury. As I agree with Matt, the garage door, the interior garage door is immediately to your left through that front door. So this isn't going to be a long stretch. That garage ends at the front door of that house. So the garage door is immediately to your left, the pass through. So if you're going to stretch a line to the front door to try to hold it there, this is the easiest house we've seen to do such. And again, you 3 o'clock in the morning, the front door is closed and no one's in the front yard. Different scenario than 2 o'clock in the afternoon with, a lone car burning in the garage and the ladies out front saying, I don't know what happened. There's no one home,
Absolutely. Breezeways were something that came up. I don't want to really look. I realize that this has a garage there. We're not going to look at that for this scenario. But breezeways were another topic that kind of came up, where you have the front door, you have a door to the breezeway, and then you have your garage. And so that gives you an extra kind of door to stretch through if you wanted to. So is that a door that you would use, or would your second line or first line generally just go to the front door, or would it depend on how much fire advancement you had? Would that be a game time decision? What do you think? Bernie, I guess we'll start with you.
I'll take it. Breezeways are interesting because it's an exposure exercise. So if that garage, that whole garage is just ripping from one end to the other, your job is to keep it from getting to the living space. So again, the decision's made. Do we want to try to put water in a fire or cut it off? In this scenario, with this sort of setup, with a fairly narrow breezeway separating the living space, I would probably opt, given the choice, especially as the first due guy here, to cut the fire off. I always go by the Recio versus as well, which Matt and Chris were both talking about. So make a decision, stick with it, cut the breezeway off. You're really not going to have a heavy fire load in that breezeway. So it's just a matter of pushing it off of the living space of the house. That's my read on this one.
Okay. Chris?
Kind of similar to the house that Matt was talking about. That garage is forward. Well, the garage is kind of on the other side. What I see here is like, a strip mall. Got to go through that front door, up the stairs through that front door and kind of almost write that breezeway off if there's heavy involvement in that garage. If not, buys it a little bit of time. Typical house, not too hard to negotiate that to get to the left, to get to that breezeway area. And then, mount your attack there. But I kind of see it like a strip mall. If there's heavy fire in that breezeway or a lot of smoke coming out those windows and doors, just write it off.
Get ahead of it as best you can, without a doubt. Let's see. Last one. All right, so here we have a garage. Not only is it in the basement, but it's in the rear. So what are you doing there? I mean, is that changing anything, or what do you think? Chris, I'll just start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to change it. I hate to say, like, Matt started, always, never. We talked about a heavy amount of fire coming from that Charlie side. If we knock that down, it's no easy task to get back around to that front door. Hopefully I have the ability to stretch a line to the Charlie side while simultaneously stretching a line to the Alpha side. Is that a set of stairs on the Bravo side, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. So that's probably like you're in that little kitchen area.
Yep.
I think it's going to be different each time.
Yeah,
if that front door is open or I have a lot of smoke coming out of there, I might stretch through that front door. I definitely have to do, again, I got to see that Charlie side of the structure to see what's going on. Small house, older house, that garage is probably packed full of stuff.
Yep,
and that quarter line may not even dent it.
Yeah.
What'd you say it was?
No, it was when I lived there. So.
Oh, okay.
So I have one question, and then we're going to start with a couple of those internet pictures that I have, and then we'll do some scenarios. So it hasn't really come up specifically, and so I want to kind of get your thoughts on it. How much does the integrity of that interior door matter for where you're stretching that first line? So we talked a lot about either the line going to the garage or the front door. No one said yet, and maybe that's because it doesn't go through your mind, or maybe it does, that it depends on how that door between the garage and the house is holding up. So if you go back to, again, something like one of these here, do you take a peek into the front door before you decide where your line's going? If you peek into that front door and it's clear as a bell, that the door between the garage and the house is holding up. Or are you jumping right to, this is where I'm stretching my line no matter what? So I'll start with Matt. Are you taking a peek into that front door before you decide where your line's going, or are you making your decision from an exterior walk around?
The decision's hopefully going to be made by the first two officer. We're going to find out real quick if they did their 360 and how well they did it. The homeowner, if they're present, a good question to ask them is, for where is it? And your observation inside, if that door is open, for whatever reason, you're going to have conditions that are telling you it's open. It's going to be pretty obvious. I mean, you're not going to have the fire venting and drawing like that and not having it give you some indication. So I'm not going to expect my first officer to do a 360 and then poke his head in the house and figure out the layout of the house. But that might be good information to obtain from the homeowner, and also just looking in, and whether it be through the front door or while you're walking around through windows and seeing what kind of smoke condition. Okay. You're certainly going to have a smoke condition. You're probably going to have a fire condition if that door was in fact opened.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris, is your line placement changing based on integrity of that door between the garage and the house?
Yes. Yeah. So that integrity, I agree with Matt. Sizing up your building, reading your smoke conditions is going to give you additional information to make your decisions. And that's what's key. We can't, Matt said again, always and never. If that door is held and the integrity is still there, taking that time to knock it down, perfect. Stretching through. I'm going back. The house on the upper left is similar to that second alarm that I was talking about. That was like my first second alarm fire as a chief officer. House was bigger, a lot of involvement, and the crews went through the front door on the alpha side, stretched into the kitchen, and I remember hearing the guys saying it was like a blowtorch. The integrity of the door was there. It was like a blowtorch when they opened up that door. The Mayday was a guy that got burned a little bit. That's huge because opening up that, even though the integrity of the door is there, when they opened it up, they're met with conditions in the garage. In that situation, there were 2 cars. I remember the fuel burning, a lot of fire load. Their 1 3/4 line just did not handle it at all. So, going back and looking at previous calls and learning from your mistakes, that would have been a good, if I had to do that fire over again, it would have been like, hey, let's get some water onto the fire. Let's knock down a large body of the fire. Then let's stretch it. So basically, to answer your question, the integrity of the door, yeah, I think that's going to play a role in your decision process.
Okay. So per Bernie's request, let's do some scenarios. So these are a couple of these are
real quick. If we could just go back to that picture for a sec.
Yeah.
Or not. We'll just talk about it for a sec.
Oh, go ahead.
Because Chris said something really important. I don't want to gloss over it, but think about the scenario he just described and let that kind of paint that picture a little bit and let that bake in. As far as, because that tactic is used a lot, and you assume a lot of things going perfect, but once you breach that door, all right, you open that door to the abyss and you have all of that energy in there. All right, it's pressure, and pressure is going to bounce. So it's going to be bouncing right in your face. So again, depending on A crew or E crew or Z crew that's there, if they're not truly ready for water and ready to push, the fire is going to find them pretty quick, and they're going to be pushing themselves right back. So we assume and take a lot of, a lot of assumption that everything is going to go smoothly, besides the ability of that crew to push forward into that. But that's also assuming that we haven't kinked our line. We commonly kink lines. We don't talk about that enough. And whether it's because we have poor hose or we have insufficient nozzles size, or we just don't do good stretches. But, if any of those factors fail us at that point in time, all of a sudden that open door, and we talk about controlling door, but that's not always the first priority, the nozzle firefighter. But if something doesn't go exactly as planned, you're going to have that scenario. And that's not always acceptable. So, there is that scenario where you went from a fairly clean room to, okay, the door's open and now all that energy is coming back at us. If we got good water flowing, a good crew pushing, yeah, it's cool. But if something doesn't go right, that's going to entirely change the equation.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, if I could just add,
yeah.
One of the points that I heard here too from both these guys was whether that door is closed or not. The guy doing a 360, he's going to get a good idea of what's going on in that house. But when he opens the front door, he's going to know if that door is closed or not to the garage. Because if he opens the door and it's a shitstorm at the front door, that door is no longer in place to the garage. And we're also really not talking about ventilation here. You pull up and the bay door is still in place, but you could tell there's heavy fire behind it. And you open that front door and you open a flow path to the front door, you're going to start a shitstorm there too. So all great points by everybody here, depending on your decision. If you're going through the front door to find that interior garage door, and I've been in plenty of these where you've had a shit ton of fire in the garage, but there's almost no smoke in the living space because the door's in place. It's got a couple of layers of sheetrock on it or whatever. It's a rated door, and you open that door and all hell breaks loose. So those have to come into your decision-making process.
Yeah, and I think like Chris said, you got to do a 360. I think your 360 either has to begin or start with opening that front door and seeing what conditions are like there. At least that's kind of what I think. So, all right. So this, we're going to go through, I have a couple fires with pictures. So again, it's not going to tell us the entire story, but at least there are some very good discussion points. So this was last night in Madison. So I'll let Matt start with this one. He might have some inside information as well. But it appears to be a raised ranch with a garage on the B side, well involved. So Matt, why don't you give me some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and first of all, I just want to say that I don't want to criticize my old neighbors in Madison from where I grew up, but they had a pretty spectacular looking event, right? They had a middle of the night, all the things where you've got a good advancement, obviously well involved garage, but you still have a house that's still fairly well intact. I'm looking at a picture here that was sent to me. It looks like someone's stretching a line here. I hope that's what it is. It looks like they're going right at it. I don't know all their tactics used, and I don't want to comment on it, but from based upon this picture, it certainly looks like they're stretching to the fire.
So based on what you see, you pull up, this is what you got, and I'm giving you no other information. Are you going to the front door, or are you going to the fire?
I'm going to the fire. I mean, this is one too, and I don't know where the position, in particular, if I'm in a volunteer department and I'm short on manpower, if there's a machine there and there's a pump operator here, something like this, this house, it doesn't have a significant setback. You can get your first due machine somewhat lined up. This may be a good opportunity, particularly on a department that may be low on manpower, questionable manpower, where you could have your first due pump operator get up and effectively use their deck gun. Or, again, I don't know how Madison sets up their machines as far as if they use blitz or what, but if nothing else, a 2.5 is tough in a volunteer department. One firefighter is not going to get a 2.5 in operation all that easily. I mean, they can, we train them to, but they may be better off using one of the other devices initially, but this could be a very easily effectively use of a deck gun for a short period of time. I don't want to dump my whole tank on it, but we certainly could, a deck gun flowing on that for a minute is going to entirely change that picture.
Okay. Bernie, what do you have for this?
Very similar to the last one I went to within the last 2 weeks in Danbury. Same sort of things. Cars on fire. There's probably stuff in the garage on fire, or tractors, whatever. I agree with Matt. Front door looks like somebody came out of it because the screen door is open. You want to believe that the people are out. Somebody said everybody's out. Line up. I think, I don't know who this guy is or whatever's going on here, but he's really at the wrong spot. He should be on the other side of that car to push it away from, the living space. At least line yourself up as an exposure line. But he's got the right idea. Stretch a hose and hit the fire. I don't think he's going through the front door with this line. And I agree with Matt. Whether you have a blitz fire, 1 3/4 or just smooth bore, or you just line up the deck and off the tanker, blast this thing, and in 30 seconds it's going to be a different fire unless there's some large quantity of flammable liquids in there. Yep. But this is typical. This is typical Connecticut right here. Yeah. There's probably not a department represented on this call that hasn't been to these fires.
Yeah. Chris, any particular thoughts on this one?
Mirroring what Matt and Bernie said, again, getting all your information in there, looking at that front door, what you talked about. I know the screen's open. Not sure if the front door is open. Kind of looks like a doorknob on the left-hand side there. But the windows above, what am I reading? The smoke is, Matt brought a good point about, where I stretched in the front before, is that fire progressed? Is there heavy smoke pushing out the eaves now? Knocking down that fire initially for the guys that did that in Madison last night, that's a good job for them. Hopefully you're meeting people on the outside. If your life hazard goes away, there's no one inside. Yes, we still have to do a primary search, but you think about it. If the residents say everybody's out of the house, we're the ones that are putting ourselves at risk by going in.
Yeah, I think the one advantage with this one is you've got the living space on the opposite side of the garage. So whereas that other one you talked about where you and Matt were, having different, how you were going to do it. Here, we got the fire over here, but our most likely livable space is on the opposite side. So that's obviously going to hopefully increase the likelihood that victims are going to be viable and able to get out. So let's do a couple scenarios. So this is, I mean, I'm going to skip this one because we basically talked about this one for the last on and off for the last hour. But we talked a little bit about this one, but just to put a visual to it, is there anyone, I'm not going to have you guys go through this one specifically, but are any of you guys not hitting this before you go into the front door? I guess if you're not hitting it, why not? But I think we're all on the same page that we want to put some fire on this or water on this before we stretch in the front door. Chris?
Yeah, I think if you're not hitting that fire as it is now with the close proximity to the door, you're basically negligent.
Yeah. Bernie?
I would worry. I agree with Chris 100%. And I would worry about if I was, going to prove my mettle here and go past the fire and go through the front door. You stand the likelihood of your hose line, burning as you go by, as you stretch, your two guys stretch, it tightens up, it goes towards the corner of the house, and, the hose bursts from the fire impingement. So you have to hit this. You hit it quick, see what happens. And if you knock it down, then go for the front door or wait for the second line and move to the front door.
Well, so before, I know, Matt, you're probably gonna be on the same page. So let me flip this up then. If we all agree that we're going to hit it from the outside first, what line are we stretching? Are we going to stretch 1 3/4, knowing that after we hit this, we need to advance it into the front door? Or are we going to stretch either a 2.5 or a master stream, knowing that we then have to stretch a second line? Because even if it's a 2.5, I don't think it's sound practice to try to stretch a 2.5 into the front door here. So Chris, are you going to do 1 3/4 and just knock this as best you can? Or do you want your guys to stretch, either the 3-inch and gate it down, or stretch 2 lines in order to knock this down first on the outside?
I'm going to say 1 3/4. Small garage, small house. I think even the average individual on a nozzle directing that water into that garage area, I think we can knock it down with the GPM that, 185, 190 GPM coming out of 1 3/4 line.
Bernie?
Absolutely. There's certainly guys on this call that think they can stretch a 2.5 around the back of this house and up the stairs and down the stairs. And in my experience, that just isn't possible unless you have a pile of guys. So, 2 guys, Matt made the comment earlier, if you know where that water should be put and you're not, shooting the deck on over the house while you're positioning the line, if you put the water on the fire in an efficient manner, you're gonna put a lot of fire out here. So I'm a big fan of these 1 3/4 with the straight bore tips if you're going to attack a fire like this, because it's just that much more maneuverable. And especially in a small town where you have limited manpower, like where I live, you might change your mind. If I'm pulling up by myself in this, and I have, I might pull a 2.5, make a coil of it, sit my big fat ass on it and blast it. And that's my only, tactic I'm doing. The rest of when the mutual aid rolls in, they're going to have to go over me and do the rest of the job. But again, it's scenario based. It's manpower based. It's where your water supply is. There's a lot of variables here.
Yeah. I just don't see a winning strategy in stretching at 2.5 with the intention of bringing that 2.5 inside of the structure. So, all right. So we went through this one. So let's, all right, we'll come back to this one.
Hey, Dan.
There we go. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to ask Matt a quick question. So with any of these scenarios that we're talking about, and also Bernie too, because you're running. So when you guys go, to the north sections of your towns and cities and stuff like that, and you're having reduced hydrants, you're worrying about the capacity of your tank, that 2.5 versus 1 3/4 decision, when does that come into play for, Matt, you going up north? When do you sit there and go, I'd rather have the guy stretch 1 3/4 compared to a 2.5?
If I could, I just did this within the last month. We had a fire, our longest run, almost into West Reading. And I got there first in the car. The back of the house had a 3-season room. It was rocking. And if it was downtown, I would have said pull a 2.5. But the first 2 engine from the airport area got there. They pulled an 1 3/4. They went around back. They washed it down. They went right through the fire and cleaned it up on a transitional attack. But the West Reading tanker that I had called as we left the firehouse got there right behind us, and it boom, there's 3,000 gallons more of water, made all the difference in the world. But it has to come into play. You know, like Matt said earlier, you have to look at your MDTs if you have them and go, where is this? Are there there's a lot of dairy that doesn't have hydrants. And it takes our volunteers a few minutes to muster a crew because they have to drive all the way across town. But some of the New Fairfield backed us up at a fire within the last 2 weeks. They beat my second due pumper and they got there so fast. That makes all the difference in the world. And you have to play that, you know, if you know, I'm sure Matt, when he's going up into North Stamford, you know, he's got to know that Turner River is bringing a tanker, or some of the New York State towns are bringing a tanker. Before you even get there, you got to move water, you know, towards your direction.
So Matt, if you're obviously big on the blitz fire and the deck gun, are you willing to dump those if you don't have any hydrants in close proximity and it's going to become a tanker operation?
So let me just back up a question what Chris had asked. One of the things that Stanford does really well, and it's pretty cool, we've come a long way, you know, in the plus years that we've kind of put apparatus up in the north side of the city. And a lot of credit to Chief Morris because he's been real diligent. Talk about a guy that went from one extreme to the other, you know, working where he used to work to now becoming really an expert on moving water and going all in on it and coming up with some really creative solutions. One of the things that we pair up, most of our machines up there, career rigs are 1,000 tanks. So although the drivers aren't always happy to be moving around in a 1,000-gallon tank, we've done a pretty good job of getting the machines wheelbase down. But we sister up the first 2. If it's 8s and 9s, we'll use that for scenario because that's common. They're sistered up, both machines in the driveway, up the driveway. And we want to create 2,000s of gallons by that. So that's giving me 2,000s. Our next due machine, and we're usually fairly good about getting a tanker in there, is going to sit at the driveway and feed. And that's going to give us a nurse tanker of 3,000 gallons. So that's plus the additional engine. So I'm pretty much assured under our current plan, and it just played out very recently, of about 5,000 gallons of initial. So that should give me all the confidence I need to make that same attack with you know, whether I'm using a blitz fire and it's starting off at say 260 GPM, or even if depending on tip size, I want to push it up to 500, but I should be able to make that scenario. I'm putting 5,000 gallons there. And yeah, as Bernie said, is we also, in addition to that, we also start different levels of tanker task force, and we can call out as far as ways as, you know, Ridgefield, if we needed to, Scotts Corner, you can go into Westchester County pretty deep and get some great resources out of there. So I have a little bit of comfort level, but yes, that question's been around for a long time. When I was a volunteer years ago, when I was 17 years old up in North Guilford, Connecticut, there was firefighters who used to say, you know, conserve water. We don't, you know, no, we conserve water, we grow fire. So I've never, ever subscribed to that. I've heard it for years, and I'm sure Bernie up in your area, you've heard it a lot of times. And I think it's horse shit for excuse my language, but no, when we have fire and we have water, we put the water on the fire. If I put all my water on the fire and the fire continues to grow, it's a battle that I probably wasn't going to win anyways. So, but I'm not into the water conservation school, and I don't think I ever will be. So just a little bit about us. So yeah, I have that comfort level, and I've heard the concerns for it, but I think our system as it's built right now is pretty good. And we recently tested it and it worked pretty well. So that's a little bit about where
no, that's definitely a good, valid argument for just, but so if you're going to do the blitz or deck gun or whatever, and then you are starting to run low on water, will that, change your assignments for an interior attack? I mean, certainly running out of water while throwing a blitz fire in is a lot different than while you're inside knocking it down. So, you know,
yeah.
Does that
Look, most of my blitz fire, if this blitz fire, the blitz fire is not a defensive nozzle. It commonly is associated with that. And I still have firefighters on my shift that think that somehow we only brush that off when we have a well-involved commercial warehouse, pool supply chemical warehouse, and we're going to be there for 7 hours. But it's also offensively, it's not a long-term offensive nozzle. If I'm in a 5 minutes of offensive mode, I'm not offensive, I'm defensive. I mean, to me, offensive is a minute or two. So in a minute or two of blitz fire, how much water am I using? 500 gallons, 600 gallons? I've already put 5,000 gallons. So if I'm needing to use that much water, I'm really not in the offensive mode. And that second line going in the front door really shouldn't be taking place, because I'm kidding myself about what type of fire I'm dealing with. So I don't look at it that way. Not that fire conditions can't change and I can't select my modes around, but I don't think that's as much a concern. Okay. Assuming that all my pieces of the puzzle come together as they should, because they don't always do that.
Absolutely. Did you guys have anything else you want to touch on, or should I throw out a couple more scenarios? I'll do the scenario. So I am going to go back to this one, because I actually think for what we were talking about, we kind of brushed we hit a lot of it, but we didn't delve into it deep. And so this scenario being, we'll call this 3 a.m. So I know it's light out, but 3 a.m. Are we 100% going to the garage? Or are we going to the front door? Or are there keys that we need to know before we make that decision? So I'll start with Bernie.
Figured you'd do that. Again, I think my tactics change depending on the manpower.
Okay.
If it's 3 a.m. and this is a outlying district, and as Matt has explained eloquently, the tanker shuttle, scenarios, a 3-man engine pulling up to this might be the scenario where the two guys stretch 1 3/4 of the front door to effect a possible rescue, and you tell the driver, open the gun on it as we get to the front door. Make a stand. You wouldn't be wrong if you went through the front door of the line to try to hold the fire. If the people aren't in the yard, you have to rescue them. So, chances are you break down the front door, the place is full of smoke, there's victims upstairs. This is probably a 4 or 5 bedroom house, so again, 2 guys don't go a long way in these scenarios. I always default to putting a fire out. I love Matt's explanation of, really, I don't care how much water I've got. If you put it on the fire, it either goes out or you call an excavator. I think your scenario here is a classic decision-making scenario. You can either do a rescue routine, hold the fire, hold the stairs, or attempt to put the fire out and wait for the second guys. Both have their drawbacks. If the house is full of smoke because the interior garage door is open or burned through, another 90 seconds might mean the difference between life or death for those people in the bedroom.
So then what's the downside? Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to. What's the downside to just saying to your nozzle man, start the 1 3/4, and you as the officer opening up that front door and seeing what you have in there before you commit to where that first line is going? Is there a downside to that? Or is that, to me, that's what I'm doing at most of these fires that we're looking at today, other than the ones that are like below grade. If we're talking about a garage that's on the same grade as that front door, I would say over 90% of my decision is going to be based on the integrity of that door between the house and the garage.
But at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're and no one's in the front yard, you're not going to know the integrity of that doors until you break down the front door.
That's why Flash Fire has great forcible entry classes.
They do, absolutely. The forcible entry props are key.
But so to that point then, are you going to prioritize getting water on the fire versus keeping the fire from spreading into the livable space of that house?
I don't think there's a perfect answer. I think that officer, based upon their experience, and again, we have a wide audience here tonight. So in the town I live in, we're not going to be able to stretch along the front door and go down the hall and push the fire, keep the fire in the garage. It might be just one guy, daytime or nighttime, that's going to be able to you know, loop an 1.75 inches, 2.5 or blitz fire and just hope for the best and knock some of the fire down, wait for, you know, mutual aid to come over the hill. In Stanford or Bridgeport, Hartford, you know, you're showing up with 40 guys on a first alarm fire, you can do all sorts of scenarios. Even in Danbury, this could be either way in Danbury. It could be way up north where the 3 guys on engine 25 are on their own for 10 minutes, or it could be downtown where we're going to have, you know, the 14 guys from headquarters there in 90 seconds. So, you know, it's task oriented, it's manpower intensive. And I don't think any one tactic is, you know, custom fit for these fires. I think there's so many variables to look at, and time of day and all these other things, water supply, available manpower.
Okay.
But neither would be wrong. You know, if you get the job, if you knock the fire down, nobody dies, great job. You run through the front door, pull the people out of the bedroom, the building burns down, great job. You know, so either way, you know, and what I'm learning lately too is any house, any residential house with this much fire showing from one window, they're probably going to tear the house down anyway. So as Chris said, you know, if you know no one's in the house, the only life hazard we're introducing is our own. So all these have to come into play.
So Matt, on something like this, are you fairly dead set in terms of first water hitting it from the outside, regardless of the garage door integrity or life hazard? Or is there a scenario where you would not knock it down from the outside first and bring the first line into the front door over there?
You know, and this again, this is one of those, we're all going to look at this differently. And I'm totally cool with, you take your 1 3/4 and you want to even use your 1 3/4, because an 1 3/4, you know, we always say big fire, big water, but an 1 3/4 is a fairly effective tool. I had a well-involved 3-bay commercial garage, and the first line officer did 1 3/4 and did a great job, did a better job. I was a little upset with the officer, and he knows we talked about it initially, but it worked. Doesn't mean it's always going to work. And I caution them that, you know, it worked once, doesn't mean it's going to work on your next one. But, you know, if you have a crew that's aggressive and they can make a good push, I mean, I'm going to say, you know, you go in that front door, there's a good chance that you move to your right and you're going to either hit a dining room or a small office, and the door will hopefully be there for one. You know, there's not a back breezeway door or something like that, which can happen, but we'll assume that the door is fairly, you know, in a fairly consistent location. They could probably do that very well with an 1 3/4, as long as they, you know, they keep the line moving forward and they don't have any issues with kinks or flow. So I'm not going to say always, or I'm going to go ballistic because they didn't, but no, I, you know, as long as they achieve success, but that fire could end up very, very differently if one factor goes wrong.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what about you? Is there do you see this as one or the other most of the time, or is it going to be very situational dependent?
So what you're showing me right now, 3 o'clock in the morning, given the apparatus that I have, and I know what's coming, and hydrants, and, you know, Matt talked about having all the other factors in place. I think I'm going through that front door initially. I think I'm going in, and with that thought process of not locating the fire because we know where it is, but confining the fire from that living space, which is, you know, definitely, I agree with Bernie. It's probably a 4+ bedroom house. So I want to protect that stairwell. That's probably right in that front door. So my first line would be going in and just thinking about the apparatus and the manpower and the situation. In Milford, headquarters probably can cover the entire, at least 80% of the entire city. So the headquarters units are a lot of times on scene very quickly as second and third due apparatus. The second and third due apparatus, or the second line would definitely be for that garage. But I think based on that 3 o'clock in the morning, the fire conditions, the smoke condition that I'm seeing, I'm going in that front door.
Okay. All right. We did that one. All right. So how about something like this where we have a fairly heavy fire condition. The garage is facing away from the front door, and we have potential living areas above with what appears to be already some heavy smoke coming from that second floor area. What are you doing here? So Matt, why don't kind of start with you on this one? What are you doing on something like this?
So this is, again, now we're looking at multiple lines, and we need to get these moving quick. Like, we're now into multiple moving parts, and I'm going to hope that people are able to act quickly and get the lines deployed. 2-bay finished above. You want to stretch you certainly take something big to knock it down. You got both bays going. It's a fairly good size area of the house that's involved here. You're fine with a 2.5 as long as you have realization that it's not going to be your same line that's going to make it your front door. But you really have two challenges at the front door. You have your first floor, and then you obviously have to get to the second floor because you already have extension there. So in your second floor, you're probably going to have a challenge because there may or may not be a fire door between. If that's it's dormant off the back. I've had a few minutes to stare at it, but you're going to have at least one, if not two, lines to the second floor. And you've got to be thinking about your attic very, very quickly in this spot too. So, you could be looking at one of the second floor lines going up, or, potentially an additional line looking at the attic.
But your first line is going to be a big line going to the garage area.
Yeah, I'm still going to want to look at that garage right away. There's a lot, we got a lot of ugly looking smoke here, but if this is a car going in the garage, and, Chris brought up a word that we don't often focus enough, but, we always get looking for extinguishment, right? We got to have this perfect extinguishment. I'm not always looking for perfect extinguishment, but confinement is something we don't focus on enough. If you can confine this thing, we'll get all the fine details later. We can get all the little fires here, the back seat of the car, the toolbox in the garage, but we got to be focused on confinement a lot more than we do on total extinguishment. So if we can look for just achieving confinement, this whole picture is going to change pretty quick too. All that ugly black smoke that, looks bad. If that's just a car going and we could just get it knocked down, a lot of my concerns for the second floor of the attic may be alleviated, and I'd be looking at steam, whereas I was just a few seconds looking at, jet black smoke. Okay.
Bernie, what do you think for this one?
Absolutely. I saw the pictures of the 2 recent fires in Newtown, large houses like this, a little bit different, but, lightweight construction. They burn like crazy. You burn the roof off of them. I see Chief Morgan and Lampard on the line from Woodbury watched the huge house burn up there that was empty a week or 2 ago. Once it gets up in the attic, as Matt was saying, you can't stop it. These are lightweight constructed buildings. I like Matt's idea. Knock it down. Just try to knock it down. You're not going to extinguish it. Knock it down. Slow it down. If you have to go through the front door, I wouldn't bet on what this second floor in this garage is, whether it's a bonus room, a studio. There might not even be a pass through to the living space on the second floor. It might be I see a lot of these houses around here with a stairwell in the garage to the second floor studio or bonus room or man cave, whatever you want to call it. Again, you're never going to be wrong if you put the fire out. So, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm looking at this, I got to make a decision. Do I blast the fire and wait for the second dude to maybe effect a rescue? Or do I try to split my crew so the officer goes in by himself, which is never a good idea? So again, you have to look at these things and check them off on your tactical priority list. I like Matt's scenario here that it could be just a car. You hit it once, you knock it down, the black smoke goes away. A couple of tires can be burning on the car and producing all this black smoke. But these big houses with these large spaces in them, they burn like crazy. And, we really, unless you have a ton of guys and a lot of water, we're just not going to stop these anymore.
Yeah. Chris, what do you think on something like this? Newer construction, heavy fire first floor, heavy smoke second floor. What's your first line coming off?
Oh, so definitely first line is going to be large GPM. Matt talked about that blitz fire. 2.5, that's definite. But I'm going to play Debbie Downer here, because in my mind right now, I'm thinking, can my elevated master stream reach the roof? Because this is going to pop through the roof in the attic. Bernie said it. Notoriously, these houses go very, very quickly. That much fire involvement in that garage area, we know it's going. We know it's lightweight construction. The dormer in the back, that was a good, pick off from Matt. Gets into the attic, and we can, forget about saving it. So definitely large GPM to start with, and then start planning to move into defensive operations with elevated master streams.
Okay. What are you guys doing on something like this, 3 a.m., to be able to conduct searches on the second floor? Are you going to get a line up there? Are you going to concentrate on VES of those bedrooms? Where's your second line going? Is it going onto the first floor to protect fire from coming into the first floor? Or is it on the second floor to protect, the potential fire from coming into the bedroom area? So we'll answer that question, and then we'll do a couple of the questions that I've gotten and wrap it up for the night. So Chris, where's your second line going, and how are you going to facilitate searches on that second floor, at 3 a.m?
Well, the second line's it's got to go through that front door. Like we talked about.
But is it going to stay on the first floor, or is it going to go up to the second floor?
No, I think you initially have to make to that second floor. And we talked about technology with the MDT and stuff, but we really haven't talked about technology with the thermal imaging cameras and the ability to, the incident commander to go around and see what's going on the outside with a thermal imaging camera, but the initial company officer to see what's going on inside with that thermal imaging camera. So I think we can, relatively safely get into that front door area, get up into the second floor, and, do a quick primary search and confirm that everybody's out of there. And also at the same time, play a little recon for the incident commander to see if any fire has extended into that. And I'll talk at that second box that I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Matt, second line, is it going first floor or second floor? And how are you allowing searches to progress on that second floor?
So again, I have the luxury of fully staffed rescue company. So they're not worried about the line. They're going to the second floor. They're looking at the bedrooms. They're carrying their cans. And the truck's going to be in the same position, or at least half the truck's going to be probably in the same position. I don't expect them to have a line, and nor do they need to. But it's going to be a tough call for me to make, because I'm going to rely on my company officer. If they're going to get to the first floor, it's going to be that observation. What's the condition of the door? Can they see the door? Is the door beginning to fail? If that door is beginning to fail, well, we're not going to pass fire in that point. So, they may have to cool it down, or if the door is closed, then they can make it up to the second floor. Right now, heat's rising, our energy is rising. The second floor is a higher concern, as long as that first floor is still cool. And if they say they're going to the second floor, my third line's probably going to go to the first floor anyways. And again, I still have to be very, very concerned about backing up that attic. Yeah.
Bernie, how are you allowing searches to conduct on the second floor with the second line, or are they just going up there without a line? How are you?
Like Matt said, I'm right behind both of them. The second line's got to go through the front door. You got to hold the stairs. And we, I am also fortunate. I have a rescue company, and the truck company is 4 guys. 2 would be assigned to do search. So, we're going to have 5 guys going in. I like tasks. So if the second due engine stretch an inch and 3/4 through the front door, you have an officer there deciding, do I, as Matt said, hold the door to the garage or hold the stairwells? You have to hold the stairwell no matter what. So the guys run, the rescue in the truck runs up the stairs, does a quick search, brings victims down. If the line guys know their job is to hold the fire and keep the fire off the stairs, the other guys knowing that their job is search, it keeps the task simple. We're here to search, go upstairs, rescue, get them out of there. They know what they've got to do. The engine company's protecting them. Everybody's got, a piece of the puzzle.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So a few questions that have come up, and we hit a little bit of them, but these are also ones that have been asked. So let me get out of this screen. How does new construction affect your decision versus old construction? And I don't just mean the truss and stuff like that, but newer garage codes of how they have to have more sheetrock and a fireproof, some sort of fireproof door, some of them self-closing between the garage and the house. Does that affect your decision making, or are you attacking attached garage fire the same, whether it's new construction versus old construction? I'm just going to kind of say that I'm not talking about a half hour into the fire, whereas something like what we were just looking at, a half hour in, you're a lot more concerned about collapse potential than you might be a half hour into a 1940s built cape. But specifically that first line, is your building construction going to play a big part or a bigger part in where that first line is going? So Matt, you want to start with that? Is building construction going to play a part for where your first line is going?
So that's a tough answer. And I'm going to give you a quick story, and I don't want to consume too much oxygen at this point, but it could. If you really truly know that it's new construction, you know your district, you saw the place going up, it definitely could. It's really not just even first line, it's my entire tactical priorities. If I know the place is a piece of garbage, if I know it's a building that we watched or we walked through and we just know it's just not a place that I want to invest my money into, then that could have depending on the volume of fire, time of day, duration, all those factors that we quickly assess. Yeah, that could change our entire tactical priority. But getting back to that recent fire we had, good initial knockdown. Fire continued to kind of give us problems. We went back afterwards. We're kind of struggling with why the floors sagged early. So a lot of weird things happened. But it was a modular. It was a house that you never would have thought by pictures. You wouldn't have thought it was a mod. The location down a long driveway up a hill. I mean, how they ever got cranes to lift this thing is, I would have loved to have seen how they got it in there. But it was a mod, and it had a lot of plenum spaces. It had a mix of open web trusses, and it had some conventional lumber that nothing made sense in this thing. But the fire ravaged it. Fire came from the garage up an open space. There was like chimneys that threw it up to the second floor. Did some really, really weird things. That's a good reason to walk through your fire a couple of days later and really get a good understanding of it. But something like that, would it have changed on initial? No, because we would not have known, unless I lived in that house or I built that house, I wouldn't have known it was a mod. I look forward now. I look at houses a little bit differently now, and would be a little bit more, understanding that maybe homes that we don't think are mods are, but they behave really poorly in fire conditions, and fire loves them because it's given them plenty of space to move, and it's definitely going to behave differently. This one did, but it's really hard to make that initial on your 360 unless you know that place and you watched it go up.
So Chris, is building construction going to play a part on your early decision making, or not too much? The same priorities apply, and you're going to stretch your line based no matter how the building's built? Is it more important, the construction or the makeup of the house?
I think my initial decision is, based on the fire conditions, the construction is not going to have a big difference in my decision-making process. Looking at all these houses, could they be truss? Could they not be truss? The newer construction, like Matt was saying, are you guys seeing the problems with like soundproofing and what they're doing inside? Like, Danny or Bernie mentioned a bunch of new condos. I mean, the sheetrock that they use and the lower width in joists and just the wood composition and all the wires that are being run and stuff like that. So there's a lot of extra fuels that are in these buildings that are going to increase in it. But I think initially, really important, do your 360, do your good size up, and then start formulating your game plan. The time you are allowed to be inside of that building, I think that's where your construction starts to take place.
Okay. Bernie, is your initial line placement going to be off of construction at all?
It also depends too. They had one, I wasn't at it. We had one in Danbury last week where it's a condo complex. It was a garage fire ripping, and they're huge condos with like 45-foot long playrooms in the basement. So you have to take that into account. But what I would offer is everything's not what it appears to be. Especially now with the COVID thing and people all living home and people are out of work. Danbury's a weird place at times where we chop through a bay door and there's sheetrock behind it because there's a living space that was created in the garage or in the attic space. Or, you know, I went to a fire in New Milford. I think some of them were on here tonight too, where there was like 12 people living in a small house. So I think the lesson to be learned is not all that is obvious anymore. It might look like a garage, but it's really a series of bedrooms or workshop or art studio or something like that. But, you know, it's not a simple question, you know, but I like,
that's fair.
I like Chris's thing. You know, if we know everybody's out, the only life hazard we're introducing is our own. So okay. Again, if you know your area, which everybody has brought that up tonight, if you know that these condos have wide spans to them, playrooms that are 45 by 28, you know, you have to keep that in mind because they're going to fail fast. And that guy out in the street with the white hat has got to have a timer in his head. If we're not making headway and we're going, you know what, this has been burning for like 5 minutes, it's going to come down, get everybody out. So you have to have that timer ticking in your head. If you're not making headway and a fire's getting worse and you know the place is going to cave in or the joists are going to collapse or whatever, you know, very important points.
Cool. So there's 2 questions up here I'm going to read. So depending on the conditions, if you look in the front door and the door to the garage is open and smoke is rolling in from the garage, would you consider crawling in to shut the door and buy time and then attack the fire from the garage side? So I think I understand what they're saying. At the same time, I'm not sure that would be an easy thing to do. I think that's one of those.
Let me take a stab at that.
Good.
When I was very young and a volunteer, I did what later became VES, went through the second floor of the house to rescue somebody. And the mistake I made when I found the victim was I didn't close the bedroom door, and we paid for it on the way out the window. If you're in a remote town or you're, you know, a volunteer community where you don't have a lot of people, the response is a long haul from where you are, and you're the first guy there, and you can do that quickly and safely. You know, that's another decision. You're taking your card out, putting it on the table and saying, okay, I'm going to put it all on the line here. Is it always a great idea? Maybe not. Is it a good idea if you have a staffed crew with hose lines and all sorts of tools? No, but I can see in some instances, you know, you're in, I think Norfolk's on the line or Falls Village, you know, you're the first guy there and the engine is 15 minutes out because it's all the way up the other side of the hill. Who knows? It might work. I don't know. Who am I to say no?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Chris, what about you? I mean, in Milford, would you want someone to crawl in without a hose line to try and control that door? Or would you rather that person or those 2 people help get the hose line into operation?
Well, tough question to answer because I don't know what's going on. But I mean,
if that's fair.
Kind of sounds like they're, you know, if they poke their head in and they can see that door is open and they can see the furniture, I think you get in there. And then again, that's locating, confining the fire. That's just like you being on a ladder company and crawling in with the hook and the can and closing the door till the engine comes in with a line. Same process. I think the decision has to be made by the individual based on his experience and his knowledge to do that stuff. So,
cool. Matt, any thoughts on that?
It probably wouldn't apply to my workplace environment, but I could see it clearly in a volunteer arena. And I can tell you, It's no different than if you're a volunteer and you're right first due and the house is 5 doors down from you and it's a bedroom fire, right? In this case, we're talking about a garage, but if it was a bedroom fire and I found myself in that situation and you can grab the door to the bedroom and you keep it contained to a hutch or a bed, a mattress, and until the line gets there, yeah, we've done that. Yeah, there's risk. We're in the risk business, so I shouldn't come as a shock to anybody to say that, that's what we do. I'm not going to sit there and put a stamp on it and say it's the best thing, always try to do that. But if you found yourself in that scenario and it looked like a good play and it could, particularly if there was no engine in sight and, there wasn't a line in the process of being flaked out and you thought you could make it and it worked.
Well, if engine 3's on a EMS run and truck 3 gets there by themselves, that could apply to your job now.
Yeah, actually, that's you're definitely a good thing you're thinking for me. Yeah, and that is a scenario, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if my guys from the truck went in and they had their can with them, and they even gave it a couple shots with the can and grabbed the door and hooked it, and at least they and they might even be able to say, hey, no, we can make a good entry with the line. They've already got the pathway set up, and so yeah, that could happen.
Cool. All right, so here's one last question, and this is kind of a very good summary of what we've talked about. But as a company officer working on your shift, what tactical priorities do you have for when you're faced with an advanced fire condition in a garage? After life safety, would you rather control the egress or control the BTU? And that's, I guess, a fancy way of asking, are you going to protect that egress or are you going to knock down the fire? So after life safety is controlled, do you have a hierarchy of what you're more concerned about, the BTUs or the fire or the egress into the main house?
Well, I'm not understanding the question, because if you're saying there's no life hazard, the egress is not the issue.
Okay.
If you knock down the fire and you reduce BTUs being produced, all your other problems go away.
Okay.
I'm just a gigantic proponent to put the fire out. Everything else falls into line. So, you look great. I went through the front door, we held the stairs. Okay, well, the fire's 70 feet to your right in the garage and it's still burning like crazy, making its way into the attic. So what did you accomplish?
Yeah.
I like to think that 200 years ago, bucket brigades had the right idea. Just throw water through the window and hope the fire went out. We're almost back to that now. You pull up, shoot water at it, knock the fire down, and, then see where you got it. Matt said it a couple of times, knock it down and then see, reset. I'm a big proponent of resetting the plays too. This might not be working so good. Hold on, everybody. Let's take a breath. Let's go on the back and try something different, or, let's get a bigger line. Let's get a smaller line. There's a lot of variables here, but I'm a big fan of just putting water on the fire.
Mm-hmm. Matt, I think you're probably in the get the fire knocked down versus protecting egress if you have no known life hazard inside, correct?
Yeah, in a nutshell. And I'll just say, I learned that lesson as a young lieutenant. I had a fire, not in a garage, but it was a 7th floor of a high-rise, fairly legitimate high-rise fire. And I was this young lieutenant. I went down to the chief and I gave him all these scenarios I wanted to do. And it was a guy that didn't swear that often. He was a pretty soft-spoken guy. And he just said, Matt, just put the fucking fire out and we can get out of here in the next hour. And, so that kind of resonated with me with all these great things I wanted to do and all my things in my head that I should be doing. And it, it's exactly what Bernie talked about. And I kind of remember that conversation because it was very unlike the individual, but he was right. We were focusing on all these other things that, focus on the big prize, and we won't have to deal with a lot of this other nonsense that's going to consume us. So.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, well, like you said, this was a good question, basically to summarize everything. If we had stated this question at the beginning of the discussion, we would have set the kind of foundation up. Knowing the individual knowing the individual that asked the question, I'm kind of thinking along the lines of, he wants to be 100% sure there's no one in that building. So that controlling that egress is along that lines. And it's dependent, it's dependent on, the scenarios, the houses that we looked at. Some of us agreed, yeah, we would go this way. Some of us, said, no, we're going to go this way. Matt and Bernie bring up good points. It's BTUs that are going to make your primary searches a lot easier, controlling them. So a lot of fire, let's knock it down. Conditions warrant you to be able to get inside, then go for it.
Cool. All right. So that's pretty much it for the evening, guys. We went a little over 2 hours. I thought it was a good discussion. I put into the chat window a link if you guys wouldn't mind filling out the survey of just the evening, so that if we do these again, I kind of know what I can fix or do better or do worse. And you don't have to don't invite Bernie. That's already on my list. So no, just kidding.
Yeah, bastard.
So, I really want to thank the three of you guys, Chris, Bernie, and Matt, for coming out, logging in, whatever you want to call it, tonight and participating. So I'll give you guys the opportunity to just have any closing remarks on this if you guys want. So Bernie, what do you got?
This is the third or fourth one I've done with you, and it's a lot of fun. I think I like the interactive ones that we did over the winter, when we were locked down from COVID. This is kind of interesting. These two guys are great professionals, known them for a long time. And we run similar operations, but everybody has views of things. Everybody on the line, I'm impressed. I think we had 81 people at one point participating, and they stuck with us. I was waiting for people to bail, but they didn't. And that says a lot. Times have changed. This is great training. I think Matt said it earlier. We should do more of this sort of thing. It's not sexy. It's not fancy. We're not, burning the paint off our helmets and so forth. But I think we all learned something. I definitely learned from these two guys, and as much as it pains me, even you, Dan. We should do more of this. And, the people get involved, the more the merrier.
And I think if you're at home for your department, where the simulations for me come into play is not even just like, all right, what would I do as the IC, or the first due officer? But when you go through it and you say, all right, I would do X, Y, and Z, write that down and then go out there and practice that. And so if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. And I always give the example of a department I did with this. It was a strip mall or whatever. And I think we had 12 guys showing up on scene, and it was an advanced fire. And they gave me I would cut a trench to keep it from coming apart, jumping across the strip. And it's like, you're there with 8 or 10 guys. You don't have enough. You would need 4 or 5 guys just to cut this trench effectively. And so really know what you're capable of, and take what you think you can do and go practice it or go try it and go from there. Matt, what do you have for closing remarks?
Well, one thing, I'm glad it's 9:17 because that means overtime. So that's first order of business. But
time and a half of 0 is still 0. So.
Yeah, exactly. No, and also, this kind of discussion is good, and it'd be nice if you take it back to your own department in the Zoom world that we're in now. And I think we'll see a lot more of this if we have the ability to talk about our fires rather than just tell everyone it was a good job, which is, again, that's a low bar that the fire service is very guilty of. We should critically think out our fires. We should discuss tactics. We should learn from each other. And again, we've had some panel of 3 other professionals that I'm down with that I have in the highest regard, and walk away with really appreciating some of the information that they've been sharing. When you go back to your firehouses, and I mentioned it early if anybody got here late, but this scenario we can practice this scenario, and it doesn't have to be Monday night with 17 companies, or you can send 17 companies to different locations, parking lots to do it. But get in the scenario of saying, hey, if I need one firefighter to deploy a blitz fire, can you do it? Can you, if you're pre-connected at 400 feet, I probably only need 100. Can you effectively, break it at 100, hook it up to the discharge, and how quickly can we time this? Do we time our tanks? Can my pump operator be able to run the deck garden by himself? And do we time our tank, or do we put a timer on this? Because I like a minute or two. I don't want to wait 7 minutes. If we call for this and it's a 7-minute operation, my tactics are out the window. I don't need a 7-minute operation, but these are the kind of drills we should take what we're talking about and make them into company drills and then practice them. If you think it's beneath you, I can tell you can go to LA County Fire Academy's YouTube channel, and they've got excellent videos showing LA County firefighters doing deck gun operations versus stretching 2.5. And I'll give you a hint which one's faster. It's the deck gun by about 1.5 minutes in getting water out of it. So it's definitely, any company can do this in any parking lot with or without a hydrant, and it's stuff we should be knowing, and you should know what your company can do before you give that order. So otherwise, I'll yield the rest of my time to my good friend from Milford, and wish everyone a good night.
Chris, thank you, Matt. Chris, what do you have for closing?
Well, basically, Dan, my pleasure. It was an honor to be on here with both Bernie and Matt. You know, these guys are top notch and stuff like that. When we look at what we did tonight, I mean, this is the new form of recognition prime decision making. You know, doing scenarios, talking about it, and, you know, for the old guys, you know, building our slide trays. This is what the future holds now. So thank you very much, and hopefully everybody be safe.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys, everyone out there. Thank you for logging in. Please do the survey if you can. And if you have any other questions, just, you know where to find me on email, social media, or whatever the case may be. So Matt, Chris, and Bernie, thanks again. And
be safe.
We'll see everyone out there soon. Thank you.